Our top focus. Russia and Ukraine continue their war of drones and missile strikes, even as Ukraine's Western allies ramp up their pressure on Russia through fresh sanctions on Russian oil export infrastructure. Russia has said that the Kremlin is analyzing the latest sanctions and will act according to its interests, following Hungarian PM Viktor Orbán's bold declaration that Hungary will help Russia avoid the sanctions. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has said that Russia will do what suits its interests and will not act against another power. This follows the sanctions imposed by the US on the two biggest Russian oil companies, Lukoil and Rosneft. In more news on the war front, Russian Defense Ministry has claimed to have captured 3 more towns in eastern Ukraine. According to the ministry, Russian troops have taken in certain parts of a region, prominent in Donetsk as well as Zlagoda region as well, have been captured by Russian forces. NewsX has not been able to independently verify these claims. This comes as Ukraine ramps up missile and drone strike offensive, with reports of Ukrainian drones striking an apartment complex in Moscow region. 5 people have been injured in the attack, according to Moscow region Governor Andrei Vorobyov's Telegram channel. Joining us in the broadcast is Mr. Andrew Latham, Professor of International Relations, joining me live from Minneapolis. Professor Latham, I have to begin by understanding, what is your perspective at this point in time of where the war situation stands between Russia and Ukraine?
Well, the war situation is actually quite straightforward at this point. The Russians are making grinding advances. There's an occasional Ukrainian counteroffensive, but by and large, the war on the ground very slowly is unfolding in Russia's favor, especially now in Donetsk and Luhansk. Those are the 2 most important provinces from Russia's perspective. That's on the battlefield. On the strategic plane, there's this exchange of long-range fires, drones, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and both sides are looking to knock the other's economy out for the winter. For the Russians, it involves going after the energy infrastructure that both fuels the war effort, but also to undermine morale by making it very, very cold for the Ukrainian people during the winter. And on the Ukrainian side, they're looking to knock out Russia's principal source of international income, which they're using to fund the war, which is their oil infrastructure. Occasionally, missiles go astray and hit and injure or kill civilians, and both sides are playing the propaganda card, claiming that the other side is deliberately attacking civilians, which I don't believe to be the case. But civilians are being killed. So that's where we are. If I had to put my finger on one side or the other as victors, I think the Russians are slowly prevailing, which is why Western pressure, with the exception of Orbán's Hungary, is building in Europe and, of course, Donald Trump's recent economic moves.
Professor Latham, interesting that you bring up Europe. I have to then understand from you, there are clear headlines since a few days that EU is in fact stalling an over 100 billion euro loan to Ukraine now, and it finds itself in quite a sticky position. What's your perspective on that, on Europe's promise of assisting Ukraine financially?
Well, yes, Europe's divided. It's divided regionally. Those frontline states are more willing to support and do whatever it takes to support Ukraine because they think they might be next. The farther you get from the Ukraine-EU border, the less support you have. And then there's also a vertical divide, as it were. Elites in Europe tend to be more in favor of supporting Ukraine, whatever the cost. And of course, people down the food chain, as it were, the working classes, middle classes, don't want to be taxed to pay for that war when those tax dollars could go for other purposes domestically. So support for the war is waning, I think, if I were to generalize in Europe. Which means that in various parliamentary contexts, that sometimes you get things like these aid packages being held up or being derailed even. And so that's where we are in terms of the domestic politics in Europe.
All right, Professor Latham, stay on with us as we shift our focus to more news. France's socialists have threatened to topple the government